Hey everyone, Mark Meckler here, and I have a very exciting, incredible, inspiring video for you tonight. A while back, we did an internship event in Washington, D.C. in an incredible setting. It was on the top of the JTN building, the Just the News building in Washington, D.C., overlooking the White House. We did an event there. We took our interns all over Washington, D.C. They did visits to the Department of War. They did a visit actually with Secretary Hegseth. They were at the DOJ. They were over at the White House complex in the executive office building. It was just an amazing tour. This is their graduation. Every year we take our intern class, the Emerging Leaders Program, to Washington, D.C. I personally attend and get to spend a bunch of time with them. This program is headed by a bunch of amazing people who actually work for the company. It features Jack McPherson, Danny Landivar, Kristen Stanchu. These are young adults that have come up through the program and are now leading the program. In fact, Jack McPherson himself graduated from our first intern class, went on to be a Marine lieutenant, then came out, worked in the private sector, and now has come back to Convention of States and is helping lead the program. What you're going to see right now are highlights from this trip. So if you want to be inspired, if you want to know that America's future is ultimately in good hands, if you want to have hope in a time when it seems like maybe hope is lost, watch this video. I was there live, so I got to enjoy it face to face with the interns, but I'm going to watch the video with you because it's that inspiring.
My name is Jack McPherson. I am the Development Director for the Emerging Leaders Program for Convention of States Foundation. Thank you. I appreciate it. We started this program about 8 years ago at Mark's behest to impact young people. You know, Mark has a program. Mark Meckler, Convention of States President, who you'll meet. He has an organization that's dedicated to restoring self-government in this country. Virtuous citizens. That's the thing that we seem to lack. That's why we're here now, is because we have hope that we can cause a change. Well, who makes changes but leaders? And that's what the Emerging Leaders Program desires to do, is create leaders, statesmen, we say. You see it on our forms that we have. If you would like to grab one before you head out the door, we say we make statesmen. And what is a statesman, right? That's the question that we ask, and that we ask our young people to ask themselves. What does it mean for me to be a statesman, to be a leader? So I'd encourage you to take a look at that programming, and we can talk one-on-one more about that. But we're here to talk about that. We're here to talk about what Article 5 is a little bit, why we think it works, why we know it works, why it is in continuity with the founding, and why it is in continuity with those who founded this country. Their continuity came from something long before the founding, right? And it's the fact that truth can be known. And when truth is known, it makes a claim on your life. And when something makes a claim on your life, it calls you to reform your past behavior and to live a different way, a better way. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Mark. Mark is the president of Convention of States. Convention of States has been around for 13 years. Mark is a great mentor of mine, a father figure without a doubt, and somebody who I've learned a great deal from. So Mark Meckler, thank you very much.
This is a pretty cool venue, isn't it? So this is the first time we've been up on this rooftop. The reason we ended up here on top of this roof is because I also took a position recently as the CEO of Just the News and Just the Network. And so our offices are here in this building. And we loved this building, one, for its proximity to the administration, right? Because you can be right here across from EOB and the White House, so everybody can come over back and forth really easily. Our White House reporter, Amanda, can just walk over there, and in 5 minutes she's there in the press briefing room. So we love that. But I walked out here, it was cold that night or that day, and I walked out here and saw this view and said, okay, we're done. Like, this is the office, because what a cool place to do this. So thank you guys for coming. Give yourself a round of applause. First inaugural event here on the roof. So thank you guys very much. I want to do a quick brief on Convention of States, what it is, but I want to start with why it is. You know, my personal background, I'm an attorney by training. I stumbled into, and some people would say helped found and lead the Tea Party movement in America. Some of you guys are too young to know exactly what that is, but a lot of you guys have been around a while. And what it led to ultimately was it led to the largest swing between parties in the United States Congress since 1938. 63 seats changed hands from Democrat to Republican. That was an incredible year, let me tell you. And my wife Patty and I were there. We were here on Capitol Hill that election night. And when we saw that victory come in, when we saw that count come in, and we were watching it on big screens, and people literally, we had international media here because everybody knew it was coming. Here's what I thought. I thought, okay, we're done. Like, that's it. I mean, 63 seats changed hands. Obviously, Washington, D.C. is going to pay attention to that. They're going to start following the Constitution. They're going to spend less money. Government's going to shrink. And so I was sure, like, almost like, okay, my political career is done. I've done what I came to do. I'm going to go back home and ride horses and just hang out with my family. And then what happened was nothing. Literally nothing changed. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. You think about this. Under that dome over there, we sent the biggest message that had been sent to Congress since 1938, and nothing changed. They didn't cut the budget. The regulations didn't go away. They didn't pay more attention to the Constitution. And when I watched that happen, what happened to me was I was despondent. I thought, you know, we had given our lives for a couple of years to getting to that moment. We had literally, Patty and I spent all of our money helping to build the Tea Party movement. We went from just doing very well to very broke. And I just thought, well, if that doesn't work, if electing good people is not enough, then what do you do? And I searched to try and figure out what to do. I couldn't figure it out. The guy that taught me what to do is a guy by the name of Mike Ferris. Many of you will know that name. Founder of the homeschool movement in America. If you were homeschooled, if you homeschool your kids, you can thank Mike Ferris for that. In the 1970s, it was illegal literally in every state in some way to homeschool your kids. And he asked me a question, are you satisfied with what has happened in politics, or what you've done? And I said, no, I'm miserable. And he said, you're approaching the problem incorrectly. You think that we have a personnel problem in DC, but we don't. And I know people think that today, oh, the people, if we just had better people. But the reality is, he said, we have a structural problem. We've broken the structure of our system of government. And unless we fix that, it does not matter how many good people you put under the dome. They're going to get swallowed up by the system, what we all call the swamp. And that's what was happening. And he explained to me that the founders, the framers of the Constitution, put Article 5 in there, the second clause, to give the states the opportunity to route around the federal government. First clause says when 2/3 of Congress want to propose an amendment, they propose it in Congress, they send it out to the states for ratification by 3/4 of the states. But what happened was Colonel George Mason stood up September 15th, 1787, 2 days before end of convention, and says, look, if we let them do that, if it's only Congress that can propose amendments, do we really think they're going to restrain their own power? Like, what human being, what tyranny have you ever heard of that just one day woke up and said, hey, you know what? I think we have too much power. Let's just give it to other people. Like, it just doesn't happen. And so they put the second clause of Article 5 in there unanimously, no debate, and they relied upon statesmen in the states to restrain the federal government. And here we are about 243 years later, and we've never done it. We have never called a convention of states. The states have not exercised their ultimate authority under our federalist system to route around Congress, to route around the president. No presidential approval needed, no congressional approval needed. The states can do this on their own. And so when you look at that building and you think they have way too much power and they're doing too much and they spend too much money and they regulate too much and all that stuff, and President Trump and the current administration, God bless them, are doing everything that can be done. Am I right about that? Yeah, best administration. I don't just think the best administration in my lifetime. It's the best administration I ever expect to see here. So if they can't fix this permanently, what do we do? And the answer is we back the president's play by calling a convention of states and passing amendments that do things like impose term limits, not just on Congress, but how about on the deep state, on staffers and bureaucrats? We impose a balanced budget amendment, tax caps, spending caps. And the biggest thing I think we can do is we take away their authority to do the things that are unconstitutional, that they should never have been doing. The president's doing an incredible job. One of the best places I love to see. I love to go over to the Department of Education and walk through the building and shout and realize there's nothing but empty cubicles over there. It's really incredible. But they're not going to permanently do away with the Department of Ed. They don't have the authority to do that. So the first time there's a Democrat administration, they're going to put it back in place, and they're going to make it 5 times as big, claiming Trump ruined everybody's lives. But we could pass a constitutional amendment that says the federal government may not be involved in education permanently. We can say the federal government may not be involved in health care permanently. We can say the federal government may not be involved in agriculture or energy or the environment. The states do all this stuff competently. This city should not do that stuff. All of those things exceed the authority of the federal government as it was intended under the Constitution. So that's our job. So the question is, who does it? And the answer is, statesmen do that. That's who does it. That's who steps up and takes control. When things are bad, when things are out of control, somebody has to step up and say, this has to stop. I will step into the gap. And in this movement, the people who step into the gap are state legislators. And I travel. I've been in all 50 states. Actually, North Dakota will be my 50th state in June, so I'm 49 states. I've met a lot of incredible statesmen in the state legislatures who are willing to step up and face whatever pressure it takes to say we're going to stand against the federal government. Not an easy thing to do. And one of our obligations, for me, one of the things that I feel most passionate about is the idea that if you're a leader, if you're a statesman, if you've stepped up, if you've served, if you've been willing to fight the hard fight and you've paid the price for it, you have an obligation to turn around and help lift other leaders up behind you. Because however old you are, I promise you for sure, one thing for sure for all of us, we won't be here forever, right? And so 8 years ago, we made this decision to start the Emerging Leaders Program to educate and elevate statesmen and stateswomen. And we've had 11 classes go through now in 8 years. We've changed the format of a program a little bit each year. The program essentially runs by former interns rising up through our program, and then they run the program. Jack, who you saw up here, who's one of the leaders of this program, was in my first intern class. He was a Hillsdale student back then, super close friend of my son-in-law, my daughter. And so Jack has come full circle. Went out into the world, went into the Marine Corps, became a Marine lieutenant. Wow, that was bad. I will pay the price for that later. Became a Marine lieutenant, went out into the private sector, and now here he is leading that internship program. So the whole point is take people who understand the values that made America great, give them the tools to be statesmen, biblical citizens, teach them the Constitution so that they have that foundation that's necessary, so that they have not only the belief in Western civilization, but the foundations in Western civilization. Reagan said, you got to know where you came from if you want to know where you're going, right? If you want to be able to preserve your country, you got to know where you came from. So that's what we teach these guys. It's a 9-month program, full school year program. We pay them to work in the organization. You know, I happen to be a capitalist. I pay our interns. It's just the way we work. And so they come along, they do actual work in our departments. They support the organization, things that need to be done. And when they come out, we send them out into the world, and some of them will go into politics, some will go into industry, some will do the most important job there is and be moms and dads, but they'll be the best moms and dads because they will understand the foundations of this country. So that's why you guys are here. Hopefully you support that program. I want more people who work here on the Hill and around the Capitol to understand this program, understand that it's out there, understand Convention of States and why we're doing what we're doing. You'll hear it and people will talk about it and they don't know. Now you guys know why, the kind of the fundamentals, how it works, and why we're doing what we're doing. In interfacing with the administration, this administration in particular, every time I go into that building over there, the EOB or in the White House, I am completely inspired because I know it's full of people who love their country, who understand the values that the country is built on. Especially there are a lot of young people over there, which is incredible to see that. It gives you hope for the future. Every now and then I meet somebody and I talk to them like, wow, this is a very serious statesman. And I want to introduce somebody that I think fits that bill. So I'm going to introduce you to Kelly Means, who works at HHS, but is the White House representative for HHS on the whole MAHA movement. Here's how I know for sure Kelly means is a statesman. A statesman is willing to sacrifice personally for principle. It's not easy. It's not about money. It's not about what's easiest for your family. It's not about what you want to do personally. It's about, you know, something is right. You feel called to a mission, and so you step into the firefight. And I met Kelly over at EOB a while ago, and I knew his story. I'd read, he and his sister wrote this incredible book called Good Energy. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend. I keep telling Kelly I've sold more of his books than he has. Probably not entirely true, but I am responsible for some of it. But here's what I heard that completely blew my mind. Kelly was building a very successful business, and he literally walked away from that business. He had to divest himself of the business to come full-time into the administration. Like, he's young, he has a young family, he uprooted his family. It's not what he wanted to do in the sense that it was the easy thing. It's what he knew he was called to do, and it was to serve his nation in a way that he could uniquely serve his nation. That's what statesmen do. So it is an honor and a pleasure to introduce my friend Kelly Means.
Thank you, Mark. I want to talk about how I've really formed the opinion, learning about Convention of States from Mark, how what he's doing and what Convention of States is doing is one of the most important, maybe the most important aspect of reviving America. I think it's one of the most important issues in the world, because I think we all know, and a lot of us feel, our problems are not fully policy, they're really structural. We really have in this town just an overwhelming power that's been built up to prevent change and keep the status quo. And we've been saying for decades that Congress has been broken, the Senate is broken, our system's broken. It's going to reach a point where we have to stop saying that and actually ask about real structural reforms. And I want to just talk very quickly about how I've come to that realization through my passion, which is changing healthcare incentives. So I'll just step back and talk about that passion and what I really got in this fight to do. I always go back to my mom. She got a text when she was taking her morning hike in Northern California, and it was a text saying that she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Total surprise. A day before, she got a scan thinking she had a stomach problem, got that text. Shocking to her. So we rushed to her side. This was 2021, and we went to the top oncologist, and the oncologist at Stanford sat across the table and said to my mom, "This is a tough break." And learning from my sister, who went to Stanford Med School, who really put the pieces together about how broken our system is, that was a very jarring moment, because I knew my mom, she was on 5 different medications. Over 40 years, she had high cholesterol and got the statin. 5-minute meeting, the doctor said, this is normal, take the statin. She had high blood sugar, took the metformin. Quick appointment, the doctor said 30% of people, your age bracket are on that, no problem. ACE inhibitor for high blood pressure. So she had all of these steps along the way, but each appointment the doctor said that was normal. And actually, at an appointment just a couple months before her cancer diagnosis, her doctor said that she was perfectly healthy, and actually very healthy, because she was on less medications at 5 than the average 70-year-old. And it was poignant at that moment when my mom was about to die of cancer, where the doctor said it's unlucky, because I had this feeling my mom represented what's happening to millions of Americans, which, we're dying earlier than people of any other developed country. We are much sicker than citizens of any other country. With chronic disease, we're sicker than any country in human history. Cancer rates, heart disease rates, diabetes rates, obesity rates are all increasing, except this year, actually, obesity rates are coming down under the Trump administration for the first time in 40 years. So that's good. Whole food purchases actually went up 10% last year, the largest increase in recorded history. So people are changing. So that's good. But we have these terrible trends, and my sister and I wrote this book, and the core thesis is that we really have a health incentive problem. The problem is, through really broken public policy and incentives, we've created a unique system where healthcare is it's the largest and fastest growing industry in the country. Maybe AI has taken that over this year. I might have to renew the talking points, but until a year or two ago, fastest growing and largest industry in the country, and then every single pillar of the healthcare system, just as a demonstrable statement of fact, makes money when people get sick. So that those hospitals we go to make more money when there are more beds that are full. My friends from business school, they will get fired if they don't hit their quotas of beds being full. That's the core quota at a hospital. Pharmaceutical companies make more money when people are on more drugs for longer periods of time. That's led to a situation where there's very little investment in the pharmaceutical industry to actually develop cures, where 90% of pharmaceutical profits are managing disease, lifetime pills. And there's 4.9 billion prescriptions a year in the United States as we get sicker and sicker. And through the worst public policy in modern history, Obamacare, insurance companies are incentivized for premiums to go up. Because they can only take 15% of insurance premiums, take 15% for themselves, they're incentivized for insurance premiums to go up, which means they're incentivized for people to be sicker. So when the incentives of our system all require more throughput of sick patients, and it's the largest industry in the country, that's what's happened. And to me, that's why my mom missed those warning signs, because they were never told to her, because no doctor is a bad person. They weren't thinking this consciously, but there wasn't this effort to talk to her about her blood sugar, about her high cholesterol, and how that could eventually get to cancer. And now cancer rates are at an all-time high. So my sister and I went on this path, and I think a huge moment in American history was President Trump actually talking about these issues, talking about these root cause issues during the campaign. I noticed that. I started personally talking to some people on his campaign. And then Secretary Kennedy. I thought this guy was crazy. And I'm like, who is this Democrat? And started watching some of his speeches, and it's like, whoa, like he was making a lot of sense. And just out of curiosity, I went to one of his rallies, and everyone looked like a hippie. They did not look like Republican voters. But I did a little focus group. I asked these people with, looked like shamans, and I said to them, would you vote for Biden or Trump? And every single person said Trump. So I watched this beautiful union come together, and I my small insights of what they talked about as that formed. They talked about that they shared a desire to be historical figures, to call attention to the incentives that were leading us to be sick. And that they really wanted that to be a historical contribution that they made to the country. It was beautiful. And, what's happened, and I think it's still happening today, this acceptance of Bobby Kennedy Maha into MAGA. I'll never forget the applause when he came out on the stage, and it's still going strong today. Clearly we've tapped into this thing we all know to be true, which is we need real systemic reform. Before the campaign, before the election, there was a explosion of state activity. So from these ideas that President Trump and Bobby Kennedy were talking about. So around the election, we had 20 states ban soda from SNAP, and you can't have a more obvious public policy than that. Why are we sending 15% of SNAP dollars to soda? We had conservative states doing school lunch reforms on food dyes, all these other things. What was interesting to me is, while 20 states were doing this across the country, there was a bill to do the exact same thing in the Senate to take soda off of SNAP. It had no co-sponsors. So it was clear to me there's this disconnect between what's happening on the federal level and what's happening in the states. And I think you see, and as I traveled to states during that time, there's so much animation. Frankly, a lot's getting done in the states, but all these popular things, all these things that pull at 90%, it does not get done on the federal level. Now we have the Trump administration, and we have made so much progress. And what's happened both with my issue with Maha, but it's extraordinary. I think the first year, I think we forget it. President Trump has basically decided to just fire at every single existential issue that we face, issues that everyone has said for 30 years aren't being handled. It's immigration, the middle class, Maha, trying to shut down the Department of Education. Is absolutely extraordinary. And he's getting so much done. But to me, what resonates so much about President Trump, to me, and I think a lot of voters, is he was pushing bold policy, but also a sledgehammer for a system that is keeping us down. And the reality is that there has been so much power invested in this city. I think more power than the founders ever contemplated. There's so many issues, and I talk to senators off the record, and they're like, I want to do that. Of course, it's a no-brainer, but they can't be brought to do it because of the inertia in this town. I've never met a senator that is happy with their job. It is decade after decade. There's real actually depression in this town about what's happening. And to me, and President Trump has talked about Convention of States, to me a logical extension of the Trump mantra that our issues are structural, they're cultural, they're not just individual policies, an extension is the Convention of States. And I think President Trump has voiced this, but I think it's going to become more and more important. We need to have a conversation in America how to come back from the brink and make real reform to our incentives and to our structure. And I personally am starting to believe my strategy and the strategy of Maha is to fight and win on these policies and keep winning and keep enacting historic reforms under the leadership of President Trump. But it eventually gets to a conversation that has to end with something like the Convention of States. And I just, that's my story. And I just urge all of you, I think most people here, I feel it, want to really, in this town, drive profound change. We've got to win in this town, win in the day-to-day policy battles, but we've got to think strategically and creatively about what we can do to actually change the rules of the game and what we can do to not always play in a system that it's overwhelming how it's designed in many ways to not have us win. This system in this city is designed for the status quo to stay the way it is. So that's how I came to the Convention of States and why I think what Mark's doing is one of the most important things in the country. And thank you for the opportunity.
You can see why I say he's a statesman. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of them over there who are sacrificing personally a lot. And I know a lot of you work in the administration, some of you don't. There's something going on over there that I think, I just want to make sure everybody understands how much I and we appreciate. People who go work in there, generally they could make more in the private sector. They could actually live easier lives in the private sector, probably work less, make more, spend more time with their families. And there's another piece of it that happens. So that's a lot of sacrifice, and that's important that they're willing to do that we acknowledge that. There's another piece, which is in particular in this administration, that if you work in this administration, you're going to wear a scarlet letter. I consider it an honor to wear that scarlet letter, like anybody who does it. But you're going to go out in the world, and it's going to be harder to get a job. I mean, there are people who won't hire you because you worked in this administration. So anybody who's willing to do that, they are making a true sacrifice for their country. One of the things that I've had the privilege of doing in my time in politics is meeting a lot of great people. And by great, I mean people who've accomplished great things. Like, I don't care how bad of a president you are. If you become president, that's a great thing that you've accomplished. It's so rare. If you become a U.S. senator, I think there's a total of roughly 1,600 people that have been senators in American history. That's a great accomplishment. If you build a huge company, that's a great accomplishment. So I've been privileged because of politics to meet a lot of great people. Here's what's rare, is to meet great, good people. You meet a lot of people who've accomplished incredible things, and if you look behind them, you might see a lot of corpses with footprints on their backs. If you meet a lot of great people, you might meet people and you think, they're not so nice, like they're not kind people, right? They don't carry our value set necessarily. They might fight for it even in public, but when you meet them in private, it doesn't really match. It's pretty rare when you meet somebody, at least in my experience, that is great, that has accomplished really great things, but is also a truly good person. So I get the opportunity here to introduce one of those men to you that I've had the privilege to meet and now work with. John Solomon has built a reputation over almost 40 years, in my opinion, and not just my opinion, I think this is objective, of being the best investigative journalist of our lifetime. And the reason for that, there's a reason. It's not just because he's so skilled. It's because he carries a value set with him, our value set, into everything he does. You know, the organization is called Just the News because it's just the news. Because John goes out there and he follows and he follows and he digs wherever the facts take him, and then all he does is report the news. And that sounds like it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but today I don't really know many people who do what John does, and certainly nobody who does it as well. And in getting a chance to work with him and work side by side with him very intimately, what I've realized is he's a truly good man. This guy has the biggest heart you can imagine. He's an incredibly humble person. He's a great leader. And it's my privilege to introduce you to an incredible statesman, John Solomon.
All right. How many of you believe the statement in December 2020 when the government said it, that we had a perfect election, that we had the most secure election in American history? Anyone believe that one? No, I didn't see a lot of... The reason was because it wasn't true. So over the last few weeks, working with Tulsi Gabbard and the Director of National Intelligence Staff and the CIA Director, we've begun to force out some documents that I think will change the debate in America. Maybe it'll even get a few senators off their duff to vote for the Save America Act. What did it show? It showed that our government knew at the beginning of the 2020 election that our election system was more vulnerable than any time in history, and that, in their own words, that foreign powers could easily compromise the system. And they specifically flagged one capability, the ability of China and Iran to get inside the voter registration databases. Once you have voter identities, you can do a lot of things. You can vote, you can prevent someone else from voting by deregistering them, or you can run malign influence operations by assuming their identity, going on social media and trying to move their circle of influence towards a different candidate. And they knew that. The president sat for a briefing in February 2020, President Trump, and he said, declassify this. I want the world to know this. And the CIA walked out of that room and put that folder in a circular, never obeyed the president's direct orders, defied a direct order. 3 months later, China and Iran began hacking into those voter databases, and they ran malign operations. Iran downloaded 100,000 voter identities from a single state and did all sorts of things with that. China, we will be able to report soon. I'm not there, so you have to keep it in this little circle on this rooftop. 18 state databases were probably breached in the 2020 election, the largest compromising of election data in American history. And after all that happened, and we got to November, and they had the hanging election or the disputed election, what did they tell us? They told us that it was a perfect election, that there were no security vulnerabilities. And it took us 6 years to get the data that we now have out in the last few days, and the data is going to get worse from here. So I say that because elections aren't the only way that we can solve the nation's ills, and we have a lot of ills. I did this with some of the interns last night, so I apologize for doing it again, but 90% of the national debt that has been accrued in this country has been accrued in the last 20 years of our country. 250 years old, 230, we were lean and mean. The last 20, we've been fat and bloated, and we have hung a millstone around the necks of our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who aren't even born at 39 trillion, and it will soon be 42 trillion. It's an unthinkable thing, but it's just one of the many things that have gone wrong, right? We try to put men and women sports now. We try to pretend that it's normal to lie to the American people, that it's good for them, that it's normal to censor them. If we disagree with you, we'll create a disinformation board and we'll just cancel you. We'll get rid of you. If not, we'll call our friends in big tech and they'll censor you. Donald Trump was the accident that happened despite all that. He wasn't supposed to win in 24. They did everything they could to defeat him, but he won. And he has begun to change an arc of the country day by day on foreign policy, domestic policy. But this war has just begun. And Donald Trump, in the mind of the left, is just a little blip on a long Chinese horizon where they're very patient. They want to get their agenda accomplished, and it's a different agenda than our founding fathers had, that I think everybody here probably has. But elections are one part of it. I do think that you're going to see some accountability that will make the next elections a little more safe, a little bit more secure. I think the Supreme Court will make some historic rulings in the next few months on Mississippi and Louisiana, so keep an eye on that. I also believe that we're going to have MAGA, Maha, thanks to Kelly and all the good works he's doing. I got a new one, MAAA, Make America Accountable Again. It's going to happen. And just an hour ago, while you guys were assembling on the rooftop, The Justice Department announced that it took the Southern Poverty Law Center and indicted them for 11 charges of fraud because they gave $3 million to right-wing extremists to have them become more violent so that they can then call the right of America a more violent side of America to influence the 22 and 24 elections. Just think about that. 11 felonies for a group that came to rise in the civil rights movement. Instead now today caught violating our civil liberties, tricking us into thinking or creating an illusion. The last few years have been about illusions, right? The illusion that we elected a guy who might have been a Russian spy. That was kind of funny when you think about it now, how ludicrous the concept was. But the Washington Post and New York Times, they surely believed it. They reported it for 3 years. Then it was Joe Biden wasn't corrupt. It was Donald Trump who was corrupt on Ukraine. I think we turned that one a little bit more recently with the stuff that are coming out there. And I've been asked many times, what are we in? What's going on? What is it about? And among all the things we're doing, we're in a war on truth right now. The left wants to eviscerate truth. And it starts with simple things like a man and a woman can be the same thing, and men can play in women's sports. And Donald Trump isn't the duly elected president. He's a Russian spy. But their ultimate goal, and I've been saying this, and some people were mocking me for a while, but thanks to Senator Tim Kaine, I've been proven right. Their ultimate goal is to eviscerate the ultimate truth that this country was born on, and that is that we were given inalienable rights by our Creator that can't be taken from us by government. And I said that a few times, and some of my friends in the media like, oh, Solomon, you've gone off the right-wing edge. You're a nut job. And then like 3 days after I gave that speech, the Senator Kaine said, no, we don't believe that God gives you your rights. Government gives you your rights. And he backed me up, and that's probably the only time I've ever thanked Senator Kaine, but I did. Well, that is the real goal that we're in. And truth is fought on many battles. It's fought at the kitchen table. It's fought at the water cooler at work. It's fought in the marble buildings of this extraordinary city where a lot of great history has been created. It's also fought in the way that we address our government. And for a long time, for 4 or 5 years, we were prevented from addressing our government. If you're a parent worried about your school board, you were considered a domestic extremist, remember? If you wanted to object to the 2020 elections, you were thought as a domestic extremist or a threat to national security. But I think right now, at this moment, we are at a special opportunity to tell our government that this is our government, not their government. Bureaucrats don't tell us what to do. Bureaucrats don't get to spend our money or do things without the accountability that affords them. Now, the Justice Department will mete out a lot of accountability in the next few months. And I've heard that for a long time, but it's really coming. Today is shot one, and I really think that MAAA started today. I think you'll see John Brennan and James Comey and others indicted in the next few weeks, and that will build. There'll be probably about 40 indictments between now and November under the current pace of the investigation. That's a small drop in the bucket in a very large battle to reclaim truth in America. Now, one of the ways to do that is to win elections. We'll see what happens in Virginia tonight, whether we go 10-1 Democrat or say 6-5. But I think at the end of the day, elections are just one part of the puzzle. Yes, you got to get people out to vote in the fall. And AFW and other folks have done such great jobs doing that in 2024. The best, I think, in the history of Republican Party get out the vote operations. That capability is building. Democrats live for lifelong elections. They like to have an election every couple of days, and they have a permanent infrastructure. Conservatives have a lot of other things they like to get done, building good companies and building good solutions for America. And they only do elections part-time, but we're getting better at that. But I think the ultimate opportunity is for each of us here to look into the face of our government and say, it's our government, and after the last 20 years, we must take it back from you who want to keep the status quo because it's an unsustainable status quo. It doesn't resemble what the Founding Fathers intended. And I think in that opportunity is where the Convention of States has gotten so much, I think, gains in the last few years. It is the ultimate solution. It's what our Founding Fathers imagined at this moment. They knew at some point a central government like King George would get too big. But now is a moment for us to tell them, we are going to take you back. We're going to reduce you in size. And why the Article 5 solution is so interesting is because it really was the thing that our Founding Fathers were thinking about at this moment. And so a few weeks ago, I wrote a story about some of the things going on, some of the states and the gains, and President Trump, to my surprise, truthed it out, which gave me some inkling that maybe he thinks it's a good idea too. I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it yet. But I think if it's important enough for the president to spend a few minutes sharing it with the world, it's important for all of us to consider it, to push it forward, to get it to that magical number so that someday soon, before our grandchildren inherit that debt, that we will have an opportunity to tell our government, we're done, we're going to fix this, we're taking it back from you, not through violence, but through the extraordinary idea that our founding fathers invented 250 years ago. So it's been an honor to meet everyone that's been here the last few times. The interns last night, we had such a blast hanging out with you. But everybody here has an opportunity to play a role in this next solution. The next chapter of America will be cemented in the next, I think, 2 years. I think the next 2 years will define a 50-year run of American history. I don't know how it plays out. I intend to chronicle it as best I can as a journalist. But each of us here today, particularly all of you, have an opportunity to make a difference, to change that compass from where Joe Biden and the left said it a few years ago. Donald Trump's changing it. But I think all of us can play a much larger role in getting it done. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for sharing our rooftop, having some fun here, and for being patriots, for caring about this country and doing what you do every day to make America great again. Great honor to be with you, and thank you. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn things over. All right.
But I also just want to bring on, if every ELP current student and ELP alum could please come up with me right now. What you're looking at when you look at these young faces is you're looking at statesmen, not future statesmen. They're statesmen now. Maybe there are some of you in the audience who want to be future statesmen, who want to come through the Emerging Leaders Program. I'd encourage you to talk to any one of these people. We've got people here. We've got James Nelson over here, the very, very tall, handsome guy. He works at the Interior, and he was in my class in 2018. Got Harrison Harsh, he's at the Pentagon. Andrew there, he's working on the Hill. And Kristen here, she is our Director of Operations. Everybody else is a current student off to do their next big, great thing, and that's to lead, and lead with virtue, and lead well. So I encourage you to look at the Emerging Leaders Program. Feel free to talk to me about it. I'd love to hand you my contact information if you're interested. If you know a young person interested, please pass that information along. And yeah, hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.
There's a lot of visions, I think, for this program and programs like this, because I do see such a great need for our generation to be more involved, and having programs like this that equip that generation to do that, I think is really important.
We do what internships typically do, try to train them for particular roles, get them some experience in the political world, but the ELP is so much more than that. It's trying to interact and grow them as a person and try to get them to the point where they are equipped to go out into the world, not only from a professional standpoint, but because they know who they are, they know what their identity is, they know what their values are, and they're prepared to go out and proclaim and defend those values in the public sphere.
Something happens in everyone's life, especially in American, where it clicks in their mind. They have a responsibility to fight for their kids and their grandkids. And in today's world, freedom is very much under attack, has been for a long time, and we're seeing the consequences of communism and socialism creeping its way in. We are aware of that, and we want to do everything we can to develop people in the next generation to stop that.
I would recommend this program to other people if you're searching for mentorship.
I feel as though that is what this internship has been for me. It has enabled me and encouraged me and influenced me to be more like Christ.
I think this internship is really special in that you don't have to be wanting to go into politics, but I believe that what Convention of States stands for, self-governance, for being involved in your local government, is something that's important for every American citizen.
I would recommend this internship to someone else because I believe that it is something that will change your life in way more ways than you could ever imagine. It will really just help you understand what it does mean to be a servant leader, what it means to be a statesman, and really what it means to be an American.
I want my kids and my grandkids to be able to experience the same thing I got to grow up with, but I've realized how fragile it is.
Freedom is a fragile thing. It is fought for and won by the blood and sacrifice of patriots. I cannot in good conscience disrespect and dishonor the sacrifice of millions throughout our history that paid for the freedom that I'm enjoying today.
Going through the course of servant leadership really humbled me to realize the greatest servant leaders, or greatest leaders, are servants. That's what it is.
The greatest freedom that we can have is the freedom to pursue God and to pursue the calling that He gives us. A part of my calling is to better my country, is to better my family, is to better my community, and is to better myself through Him and through the principles of liberty. If I didn't do that, then I wouldn't be me.